Hi there, students! I'm XS. That's little x, little s, which stands for extra sweet, 'cause that's what I am. I'm a Puppy-sensei, and I make Japanese content to help you level up your abilities. Today we're going to talk about an interesting and somewhat strange quirk in the Japanese language. Well, maybe it's not so strange, but from the perspective of an English speaker, it's something that we don't think about very much because it's not a feature of our daily spoken language. In Japanese, it's considered somewhat rude to assume the desires of other people. And we see that sentiment reflected at the level of Japanese semantics. I'm going to explain what I mean, but first, let me briefly review with you one of the ways that you might talk about your own desire to accomplish some verb for yourself. Shikoku e ikitai desu. I want to go to Shikoku. That's actually true. Going to Shikoku is one of the things that I've always wanted to do in Japan, but I've never really had the opportunity to accomplish. Let's look really carefully at what's actually happening at the grammatical level of this sentence. So we have a noun, Shikoku, that's a place, and that noun is marked with the particle e, which is implying movement in the direction of that place. And then we have the verb iku, which means to go, and iku is conjugated into the tai form. To make the tai form, we take the stem iki. We create the stem by dropping the mas from the mas form, and so ikimas becomes iki, and then we add tai and we get ikitai, which means to want to go. Specifically, I want to go when talking about your own desire. So ikitai, I want to go. Shikoku e ikitai desu. That means I want to go to Shikoku. However, the last part of this sentence is desu. And that's something that we need to take notice of, because what does the presence of desu in this sentence actually tell us about the tai in ikitai? That ikitai cannot be a verb, right? That's because desu almost always follows nouns and adjectives, and we can provide additional proof of that through another example. So this example is Shikoku e ikitakatta desu. Yeah, so this is the ikitai form in the past tense, ikitakatta, ne? And based on the way that tai form conjugates into the past, we have confirmation here that the tai form must be an adjective, because this is exactly the way adjectives conjugate. In the past tense, they take that takatta form, desu ne? Okay, so since ikitai conjugates exactly the way that we expect an adjective to conjugate, right? That means that the tai form is an adjective. All right, great. How does that help us? Well, we'll see in a moment. I don't want to spend too much more time talking about the basic tai form, because that's not really what we're here to talk about today. Today, I'd like to discuss with you the Tagaru form. So this is Tagaru, and it means someone else seems to want to do something. This is just one of a couple different ways that we can talk about what other people seem to want to do in Japanese. As I said at the outset, we don't use the tai form to talk about the actions of other people, because doing so kind of puts yourself in their shoes in kind of a weird way, right? Basically, it's because you can't actually know with any kind of perfect clarity what it is that someone else actually and truly wants. Without actually being in their head, in their mind, and knowing their thoughts, you can only ever really possibly have any evidence that they might want to do something, right? Maybe they told you, maybe you're noticing something about them that's leading you to believe something. Even a situation like hearing from your friend that maybe they want to eat a hamburger, and that's based only on what they've told you, well, that's not foolproof, right? Right? I mean, not to call your friend a liar, but there could be any number of reasons why they might tell you something they desire to do when that's not actually entirely true. Maybe they're saying they want to do it because they think you want to do it. Maybe they're telling you that they want to do it, but it's actually a lie. There are a lot of reasons why, and it doesn't necessarily have to be anything bad or negative, right? But just because somebody says they want to do something, that doesn't mean that you know for a certainty that they want to do it. So that's where the Tagaru form comes in handy for us, because the Tagaru form is a way for us to say, they seem to want to do something. We're going to use it to create sentences like this one. 私の友達はハンバーガーを食べたがる. That means something like, it seems that my friend wants to eat a hamburger. Or, a hamburger. Hamburger. Anyway, there are a few things here that I absolutely want you to take very careful note of. First, who are you talking to when you express your friend's desire? Because it's definitely not your friend. Why would you need to tell your friend what it is that they seem to want? More than likely, you're telling a third party about your friend's desire to eat a hamburger. Maybe you're talking to your family, maybe you're talking to their family, maybe you're talking to a teacher or another friend, right? But you're definitely not talking to the friend themselves. And that's another reason why we really can't use the simple tie form for sentences like this. That's because basically you would be spreading rumors about the person, right? It's one thing to say, hey, I think Jack over there really wants to go sledding. But it's entirely different to put words in their mouth and then pass off that information as if it were fact. You really shouldn't do that in Japanese, right? Okay, so that leads us to the second point. Second point, we can actually use that garu ending in other cases. When we use garu, when it's attached to an adjective, that form really means like there are signs of some trait. There's evidence that this is the case, right? And it's going to be attaching to an adjective, so it kind of feels like we could use this to mean something like, oh, it seems that something is expensive. It seems that something is tall. It seems that something is red, right? I want to give you an example sentence, but let's think about this. So maybe you see some food across the room, and it's like a really vibrant red color, and there are chilies all over it, sticking out everywhere. And the moment that you look at it, you think, oh my gosh, that looks hot. Not hot, like, I mean spicy. Not. In any case, you might want to say something like this sentence. いやー、その食べ物は超辛がる. Unfortunately, that sentence is actually ungrammatical. Let me explain why. That garu form really implies that there's evidence of a thing being true based on someone's emotional state or their actions. You're picking up on the way someone's behaving or the way someone looks, and then making an assessment about how it seems that they are one way or it seems that they're another. Just like that tagaru form, right? They seem to want to do something. But as I said, we can use that in other cases. However, that means third, this is an important point, we don't really use garu with adjectives that describe physical properties of things. So instead, a much better example sentence for us to use to show garu in the case that it's talking about some other adjective would be one like this. 彼女は寒がっている. Why 寒がっている? I'm glad you asked. So this sentence means something like, that girl looks cold right now, right? It's that te iru form. Let's think about what we know about base verbs in Japanese. A base verb in Japanese is considered non-past. And that means that it's frequently used to describe habitual or repeated actions. Sure, you can have a sentence like ramen o taberu. And yes, that can mean something along the lines of I am eating ramen. But it also kind of scopes over all time. I am in the habit of eating ramen. I do that from time to time. Meanwhile, the te iru verb form describes some currently ongoing action. right? So, ramen o tabeteiru means I'm right now eating ramen. It's happening now, right? It is in this moment. It's not necessarily a habitual action. It's just happening at this moment, right? Okay, so let's compare these two sentences. 彼女は寒がっている. The girl right now looks cold based on some evidence that we can witness. Versus 彼女は寒がる. The girl is regularly cold based on some evidence. The difference between these two sentences is that in the first, we can probably point to the evidence right now in this moment. What is the evidence that she's cold? Maybe she's shivering. Maybe her lips are blue. Maybe she has icicles forming at the corners of her eyelashes. She seems cold right now, and we can tell because we can see it, sense it, touch it, whatever it is, right? That evidence is in front of it, and it's empirical. We can tell. She is currently showing signs of being cold, right? That's that samugatteiru form. In this moment, she seems cold. But in the second sentence, can you see why it's a little bit harder to really specifically point to some evidence that the girl is maybe regularly or habitually cold? Sure, maybe you could say that you're always seeing her shivering. Or maybe you often notice that she's under many blankets or wearing a lot of clothes, right? That could be evidence that she's a cold, like a lot of the time, that she's cold, maybe even most of the time. But it's really difficult to say that that's an ongoing state that kind of applies over all time, because you really would need to find way more evidence than just the evidence that you can see in this moment. You would need a way to be able to say, she's habitually cold, right? And that's just not really as easy to do with this garu form. What the garu verb form is really implying is, I can see the evidence in front of me, and that's what's leading me to believe that this thing is true about this person, whether that's something that they want to do or some quality that they're kind of undergoing in the moment. Now, that brings me to my last very important point about the Tagaru construction. Just like I said above, we usually see the Tagaru form used to describe someone else's desires in their precise current state. They seem to want to do some verb right now. And we're getting that evidence in the moment, which is why we usually use the tagatteiru form over the tagaru form. So, I'll give you another example sentence. メネジャー様はその動画にモデルを見せたがる。I also want you to understand that this is not the only way to express that someone seems to want to do something. We have other ways to do this. I'd like to do another lesson in the future on the other ways that we can express someone's seeming desire to do a specific verb. But for the moment, the Tagaru verb form is really a handy way for us to say that we are seeing some evidence that someone wants to do some specific verb. That's really handy for us, right? So, very good. I see that you might want this lesson to come to an end, but before I let you go, I want to draw your attention to one final aspect of the Tagaru form. Look at this verb. This verb is netagaru, which means someone seems to want to sleep. Based on our evidence, we can tell that maybe they want to sleep. Maybe their eyes are getting heavy. Maybe they're just kind of leaning over to one side. Maybe they have drool coming out of their mouth. But what I want you to see in this verb is that the verb has undergone a change to become an adjective, and then it's undergone an additional change to come back to a verb. Do you see that? So we started with the verb neru, which means to sleep. And then we conjugated it into the tai form, which means I want to sleep. It expresses personal desire to do that verb. And when we did that, it became an adjective because we already know that that tai form is adjectival, right? It conjugates like an adjective. It is an adjective. But When we wanted to talk about the feelings of other people and the way that they seem to want to do something, we have to add the garu verb suffix. And that's a verb. It attaches to adjectives to describe a state when someone seems to be wanting to do the original verb. The verb conjugated to an adjective, and then it conjugated back to a verb again. That's why we don't usually need the des at the end of a sentence that uses the Tagaru form, while we do usually need a da or a des at the end of a sentence with the simple tai form for your own desires, right? Because the tai form needs to be closed off with a des, otherwise it's not going to end with a verb, right? But the net tagaru form, or any verb that ends in tagaru, doesn't need to have des at the end because it's already in verb form. It ends the sentence exactly as we expect it to. I just think it's pretty cool that we're going to take a verb, express that verb as a desire, which turns it into an adjective, and then express it as someone else's seeming desire, which turns it back into a verb. That's pretty neat, in my opinion. You may not agree with me, but that's perfectly fine. Regardless, I'll see you next week. Mata raishu!